Garveyism, the philosophy of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA ACL, was the greatest anti-imperialist philosophy of the 20th century, as well as the greatest anti-capitalist philosophy of American history and world history. When most people think of Marcus Garvey, they usually associate him with black nationalism and black hypercapitalism. But if one analyzes the summation of his quotes, the majority of his statements on economics were both anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist. There was a brief revisionist phase of Marcus Garvey's development where he did give a rhetorical nod to a market economy in the 20s when he had just survived an assassination attempt, had lost his father, divorced his first wife, and was fearing deportation by the US government. In order to reestablish his foundation, Garvey made certain alliances with the black petty bourgeois to keep the UNIA moving forward. If you analyze the history of the UNIA and famous black socialists associated with it in Claude McKay, W.A. Domingo, Cyril Briggs, and Hubert Henry Harrison, who formulated the race-first ideology and was Marcus Garvey's primary jegna at Harlem's Liberty League, you will see that though this revisionist period in the early 1920s did create a split between these socialists, that didn't change the overall propulsion and direction of the Garveyite ideology within time. If we analyze the Soviet Union during this same period, we will see that Lenin was instituting the new economic policy where he was creating political alliances with the kulaks to establish a united front against the imperialists. When you are engaged in struggle against an overarching oppressive system, there are times that alliances with the upper economic strata of your population are necessary in order to create a united front against the common enemy. Lenin did it, and Garvey did it. Nobody would call Lenin an imperialist, so we can't use this small period of Garvey's development to classify him as a pro-capitalist. Garvey spent the majority of his young adult life ferociously advocating for the rights and dignity of black workers, from Colón, Panama to Harlem. He was an agitator that always galvanized and organized black labor wherever he went. According to Dr. Tony Martin, Garvey had a better record in the labor struggle than all of the Marxists in his day combined. Garvey's message spoke to the masses of black workers. 80% of UNIA members in North America were working-class laborers and farmers. His message of African pride and dignity gave them hope for positive transformative changes in a racist genocidal society. He was the international continuation of intellectual giants who preceded him, like Robert Love, Edward Blyden, Martin Delany, Henry Highland Garnett, Hubert Henry Harrison, Alexander Crummell, Africanus Horton, and the list goes on. Garveyism must be understood as radical revolutionary anti-racism. In a revolution, when you are moving from one mode of production to another, there will always be vestiges of the old order in the new political economy. Just like mercantilism contains elements of feudalism before becoming capitalism, socialism has elements of capitalism before becoming communism. As a disciple of Blyden's dialectical analysis, Garvey understood these historical relationships. In the same way that socialism contains elements of surplus accumulation and extraction, surplus also existed within the confines of the UNIA command economy, but this surplus was used for the benefit of all African people as opposed to an elite capitalist minority. In Message to the People, Garvey describes 4 types of profit: national profit, racial profit, political profit, and economic profit, with each being defined as surplus that will benefit the UNIA aim of black improvement and anti-racism. Garvey even identified a universal classification of profit called human profit, defined as the addition of more members into the UNIA to strengthen the labor force. Similar to how Marx discussed the science behind the organic composition and accumulation of capital in social formations, Garvey discussed the science behind the usage of surplus to facilitate the evolution of an oppressed African people in a racist society. Under Garvey's direction, this surplus was used for the local, national, and international UNIA ACL directives against racial imperialism. Marcus Garvey stated that the Russian Revolution against the feudalist czars was a blessing for humanity. The UNIA was an African analog to the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party that became the Bolsheviks. It was ran like a provisional government, with horizontal, democratically operated auxiliary cooperatives. As opposed to running on a strict profit motive, the UNIA promoted collective uplift through the imposition of price controls where no individual could own more than $1 million and no corporation could own more than $5 million. The UNIA extracted the surplus and used it to generate a trust in the form of a black common pool of resources to invest in infrastructure projects throughout the African world. Garvey wanted to modernize the African mode of production and establish a society based upon African values. The imperialist elite always hated Garvey. They hated him in Jamaica They hated him in the US, and they hated him in the European colonial settler states of Africa. They worked hard to prevent Garvey from reaching Africa, and even instituted a capital punishment against Africans who dared to read the Negro world out in public. The students of Garvey in Lumumba in Congo, Njoma of Namibia, Nkrumah of Ghana, Kenyatta of Kenya, etc., used elements of scientific Garveyism to invigorate African workers and traditional societies against the imperialists. They did this by building on the policy objectives of the 1929 Marcus Garvey People's Political Party in Jamaica, which laid the foundation for anti-colonial struggle in the African world. These policies included self-government and the rejection of colonialism, a minimum wage, land nationalization, public libraries, compulsory urban improvement for large profit industries, mandatory infrastructure improvement, imprisonment for capital bribery in politics, state bonds for agricultural development, home development, a ban on capitalist gentrification, universal education, universal healthcare, universal electricity, and union finance campaigns. In summation, it is clear that Marcus Garvey had immense anti-capitalist sentiments and was a legendary revolutionary who sought to use the UNIA provisional government to transition African families from exploitation under imperialism to liberation in an African economic democracy.